of 1998, the Reynolds family parked their car at a Montana trailhead and set off for a weekend hike. They never came back. For 10 years, their names became whispers, campfire rumors, half-forgotten headlines. Then, in 2008, 2 hikers stumbled across a rotting cabin hidden deep in the forest. The smell hit first. Thick, sour, impossible to ignore. Inside, the floor writhed with maggots, feeding on what was left of 4 bodies slumped against the walls. A child's backpack, a rusted lantern, and a mold-stained notebook lay among the remains. It was the Reynolds. After a decade of silence, the forest had finally given them back. But what investigators uncovered inside that cabin was far darker than anyone ever imagined. July, Montana. Heat shimmering over the two-lane, pines breathing sap and dust. David Reynolds flips a paper map on the hood of a tan station wagon, knuckles creaking as if warming up for the trail. He's got that half-smile dads wear when they want the weekend to mean something. Hannah checks the first aid kit again. Bandages, iodine, the tiny tweezers she insists on. Emily, 12, slides a spiral notebook into her day pack, smoothing the crumpled cover with the heel of her palm. Joshua, 9, tugs his sun-bleached cap low, bouncing on his toes like the gravel is a trampoline. A neighbor drifts by with a gas can and a squint. "What's up, Dave? Taking the kids up high?" His voice is light but measuring. David nods, tapping the map. "Just a loop, back Monday." The neighbor heads past, and you catch the quiet, a low back fence murmur between 2 teens by the ice machine. One whispers, "Dude's playing Mountain Man." The other snorts, "Yeah, wow, hope he packed more than stories." They're not cruel, just careless with the kind of talk that sticks. Hannah snaps the cooler shut, palms pressing the lid as if sealing a promise. She glances at the sky, blue, generous, full of daylight they will spend like pocket change. "Water?" she asks. 4 nods. She watches their faces, the freckles, the eagerness, the way Joshua's lip hides a wobble when he thinks no one's looking. She tucks a granola bar into his pocket, patting it like a secret. At the trailhead, a faded sign creaks in the breeze. David lifts his pack, shoulder straps squeaking, then pauses to relace a boot, tug-tug, fingers quick and sure. Hannah tightens her hip belt, then tests the whistle clipped to it with a soft puff that barely makes a sound. Emily scribbles the date on the first page, July 11th, 1998. "Family hike," she writes, as if the words can anchor time. Joshua counts steps to calm his jitters, 1, 2, 3, then loses track when a chipmunk scolds them from a log. A pair of anglers pass, rods over shoulders, hats sweat-salted. Their voices trail behind in a hush meant not to carry. "Nice folks," one mutters. The other answers, "If they're heading past the ridge, they'll want a radio." A shrug, a boot scuff. It's nothing, and it's everything you remember later. They move in unison the way families do when they've done this before. Sun dapples the ground like coins thrown from the branches. Each sound is ordinary. Zippers, the dry chuckle of gravel, the nylon whisper of map against pocket. David's breath evens out, that steady metronome of a man who loves to teach by doing. "Trail safety," he says lightly, "not a lecture, just rhythm." Hannah watches his gait. The subtle hitch he pretends isn't there after last winter's latter fall, eyes narrowing, then softening as he stretches it away. They pause at a stream to refill bottles. Cold water bites the skin. The kids hiss and laugh. Emily tests a stone. Heel first, then toes, arms out for balance. Joshua dares the jump, landing with a slap and a grin, shaking droplets from his hands. Hannah kneels, fingers sifting the current, feeling the pull, the way it tugs and lets go. A tiny rehearsal for something she can't name. David shades his eyes, scanning the switchbacks ahead. That practiced, quiet survey fathers do when they're making sure without making a scene. A ranger truck idles in the far lot, windows down, a radio crackling with weather that sounds friendly. "Trail's clear to the ridge," the ranger says, leaning out with a nod. David lifts 2 fingers in thanks. No big talk, no swagger. Just a family stepping into green corridors, one careful breath after another. The air cools as the pines gather closer. Resin, earth, sun-warmed bark. Hannah adjusts the strap that always slips. Emily tucks a wildflower into the band of her hat. Joshua checks his shoelaces again, pulling them snug, double knot, then triple for luck. Tiny motions, small rituals, the human choreography of setting out. From the lot, The teens' laughter thins and fades. Gravel crunch becomes trail dust. The station wagon clicks as it cools, a metal exhale. Behind them, the sign sways and settles. Ahead, shade stitches the path into a ribbon. They don't rush. They breathe. They look. A hawk wheels. A cloud drifts. The first mile lengthens, then loosens, the way time does when you leave sidewalks behind. And with each step, the noise of town, gossip, errands, the brittle edge of the week, falls off their shoulders like a jacket shrugged and forgotten. Nothing dramatic, no omen, just the soft, steady hush of wilderness, accepting 4 more footsteps. The first night, nothing feels wrong. The Reynolds family pitched their tent on a flat shoulder above a creek, nylon flapping like a heartbeat in the breeze. David kneels with a camp stove, twisting the valve until it hisses, and Hannah steadies the pot with a hand that smells faintly of pine from gathering kindling. Emily writes in her notebook, the glow of her headlamp casting ghost shapes on canvas. Joshua hums low, off-key, because silence makes him fidget. Dinner is plain, pasta, canned sauce, crackers, but hunger makes it warm, and laughter bubbles up when the pasta clumps into a sticky ball. David shrugs, mouth full. Wassup with gourmet mountain dining? Hannah throws a pine cone at him, half serious, half sweet. The kids giggle until the tent shakes. By morning, condensation clings to the fly sheet, fat drops sliding like glass beads. David shifts his weight, ankle stiff. That old injury, the one he swore didn't matter. He rubs it, lips pressing flat, then straightens as Hannah catches him. Fine, he mutters, brushing dirt from his pants. But she sees the grit in his jaw. They break camp slowly. Emily tucks her notebook back, writes 1 line before leaving. Day 2, Dad limping. Joshua chases a squirrel, nearly tumbles, laughter echoing too loud in the trees. By noon, the sun is heavy, heat pressing down. The trail steepens. David's pace falters, one boot scuffing harder than the other. Hannah calls a rest. They sit on logs, sip warm water, share a bag of trail mix that seems thinner than yesterday. David pulls off his boot to rub the ankle. It's swollen, angry red. A silence spreads, not dramatic, just slow, heavy, undeniable. Hannah studies the map, lips moving like she's bargaining with it. Emily glances between her parents, pen hovering, but not writing. Joshua kicks stones, pretending not to notice. They push on anyway. David insists. Pride, stubbornness, the rhythm of a man who doesn't want to let his children see him falter. But each mile drags. Each turn of the trail feels longer. Back at the trailhead, volunteers gather in shaded corners of the ranger station. A woman fills a clipboard, glancing at the clock. They should have been back yesterday, she murmurs. A man leaning on a truck answers, maybe they stretched it. Families do that. Another voice cuts in, lower, doubtful. Or maybe not. By evening, the station wagon still sits in its place, windows fogged with heat, cooler sweating on the floorboard. The ranger shifts, peers at it, then makes a call. Radios crackle. Voices tighten. The search begins. Dogs fan out, noses low, leashes taut. Helicopter blades hammer the air, stirring dust into the eyes of waiting neighbors. Hannah's sister arrives, arms wrapped around herself, shaking her head as if to loosen a dream. They're fine, she says to no one, then louder. They know what they're doing out there. A stranger murmurs back. 10 miles of ridge don't care what you know. For days, the forest swallows sound. Boots thudding, whistles blowing, men calling, David, Hannah, until the names break into echoes. The dogs bark, then whine, then lose the trail at a shallow stream. Radios buzz with updates that aren't updates. Negative at the ridge, negative at the falls, nothing at Timberline. Nights burn with floodlights at the ranger base, searchers hunched over maps, eyes rimmed red. Coffee steams untouched, gone bitter in the pot. Gossip curls like smoke. One man mutters they might have run away on purpose. Another shakes his head, saying David wasn't that kind of father. Someone else whispers about grizzlies, their tone half thrill, half fear. The station wagon waits, patient, unchanging. A thin layer of dust dulls the windshield. Inside, a child's drawing of a mountain, taped to the cooler lid, droops with the heat. And then, the silence deepens. Searchers drift home, one by one. The helicopters leave. The dogs curl back into their kennels. Posters fade on fence posts, edges curling in rain. The Reynolds family are no longer an urgent call, but a quiet ache. folded into the stories locals tell over beer. They just vanished, someone mutters at the diner. Forks scrape plates. A waitress sighs, adjusts her apron. Whole family, gone. Wow. The forest keeps its counsel. The trailhead empties, save for the whisper of trees. And what lingers isn't the shouting of the searchers, but the absence that followed. The kind of absence that hums under your skin when you realize nobody knows where they are. Summer bled into autumn, and with it the hum of search helicopters faded. The last volunteer crews trudged home, boots worn thin, throats hoarse from calling names that the forest never answered. At the trailhead, the Reynolds station wagon was finally towed, its tires bald from sun cracking, its license plate warped with dust. The space it left behind looked naked, wrong, an emptiness people noticed every time they parked. By winter, the Reynolds weren't breaking news anymore. Headlines gave way to fresher stories, and the family's disappearance slid down the columns into small, shaded corners. But in Montana towns, the silence clung like frost on glass. People didn't forget. They carried it in whispers, in half-jokes that weren't really jokes. At the diner off Highway 2, locals gathered in cracked vinyl booths. A trucker leaned forward, stirring his coffee slow. "You hear about the Reynolds? 10 years. No bones, no nothing. That ain't just lost. That's gone." A woman with a dish towel slung over her shoulder shot back. "Maybe they wanted it that way. You ever think? Off-grid, no taxes, no boss breathing down your neck." She chuckled, but her laugh felt thin. A man at the counter muttered into his eggs. "No mother leaves her kids like that. Not Hannah. Not her." Everyone had a version. The animal theory had its loyalists. Whispered images of a grizzly dragging the family into some cave nobody had found. Others painted darker pictures. David leading them away on purpose, his limp a disguise for something heavier. "He always had that stubborn streak," one neighbor said, lighting a cigarette in the back of a bar. Another voice answered, "Stubborn don't make you a killer." Smoke curled above their heads, carrying the weight of doubts no one could prove. Years stacked like firewood. Emily's classmates grew into teenagers, then adults, leaving the empty desk she once filled as a memory no one wanted to sit in. Joshua's baseball glove hung in a closet somewhere, leather stiffening, smell fading. Hannah's sister kept calling the sheriff's office each spring, voice tight. "Any new leads? Any bones found?" The sheriff's replies got shorter, polite, but practiced. "Still nothing, ma'am. Still nothing." Every so often, a hiker reported a torn scrap of fabric snagged on a branch, or a boot print in mud that felt too small, too sharp. Each time, hope fluttered, then dropped. The fabric turned out to be trash. The footprint washed away with the rain. By the 5th year, silence hardened into folklore. Kids around campfires dared each other to walk the ridge after dark, telling each other the Reynolds still wandered up there, hungry and hollow. Faces stretched thin in the moonlight. "If you hear whistling," a boy would whisper, "that's Hannah's trail whistle. Means you're next." The group would laugh, too loud, then glance over shoulders into the black line of trees. But for the grown-ups, the parents, the neighbors, the silence didn't thrill. It gnawed. Hannah's sister kept their photographs lined up on a mantel. David with his arm around her, Hannah squinting into sun, Emily and Joshua in matching red parkas. Dust gathered. She'd wipe it away every Saturday, but the silence grew heavier no matter how clean the frames shone. In town, people learned to avoid the topic. Mentioning the Reynolds felt like tapping a bruise everyone shared, so they shifted the weight sideways. Weather's holding this year. Tourists will be back in June, but in the quiet moments, when a ranger spotted an empty campsite or a hiker failed to return on time, the Reynolds' absence slid back into the room like a shadow. By 2008, the family had been gone a full decade. 10 summers without them. 10 winters without answers. Their case file grew yellow around the edges, tucked into a drawer marked cold. Yet the story never really cooled. It lingered like smoke in clothes long after the fire. Because everyone knew, mountains don't just erase a whole family, not without leaving something behind. And when something finally was left behind, it would crawl out slow, grotesque, like rot surfacing after years underground. 10 years to the month, the forest stirred again. August 2008. 2 college kids, Ethan and Riley, were backpacking the high ridge, chasing a shortcut they'd bragged about back at the trailhead. The shortcut wasn't on the map, but Ethan swore he remembered a ranger saying there was an old fire road that looped back toward the main trail. Riley followed, boots crunching nervously on underbrush, the late summer air heavy with pine resin and gnats. By late afternoon, the sky bruised. Clouds sagged low, darkening the valley, and thunder cracked somewhere too close. Their GPS blinked uselessly, signal lost under the mountains. Ethan pretended it didn't rattle him, but his laugh came sharp, thin. "Relax, bro. We'll be fine." Riley wiped sweat off his forehead, muttered back, "Yeah, wow, fine, until we're headlines." The rain hit like stones, soaking their packs, plastering hair to their foreheads. They scrambled downhill, boots sliding in mud, just looking for cover. That's when they saw it. Half hidden behind a screen of black spruce, a cabin. At first glance it looked abandoned but harmless, its roof sagging under moss, windows shuttered with boards gray as ash. Relief sparked in both boys. Shelter was shelter. Ethan waved his arm. "See? Told you. Luck." But luck had a smell. The closer they stepped, the more it hit. Sour, rancid, clinging. Riley gagged, hand pressed to his nose. "Jesus, what is that?" The stench of rot seeped from the seams of the door, thick as oil in the rain. Maggots writhed along the sill, pale and pulsing, retreating into cracks, pouring out again in waves. Flies hummed in dense clouds, a living static. Ethan hesitated, water dripping from his jacket sleeve. His hand hovered near the handle, knuckles trembling. Maybe it's an animal, like, "Deer died inside." His voice cracked on the word. Riley shook his head hard, rainwater spraying off his cap. "That's no deer." They pushed the door anyway. The hinges groaned like a warning. Inside, darkness clung thick, broken only by shafts of weak gray light seeping through cracks. And the smell, stronger, suffocating, clawing at their throats. The floor was alive. Maggots squirmed over what at first looked like trash. Cloth, shoes, bones. Then the shapes resolved. Rib cages, collapsed and gnawed. A skull tilted against the wall, empty sockets crawling with larvae. A child-sized backpack leaned in the corner, the color nearly gone but still visible. A faded red, like rust. Riley's breath tore out of him, ragged. He stumbled back, hand smacking the wall, eyes locked on the small shoe half buried in the dirt. Ethan whispered, voice shredded thin. "Oh God, it's them." Everywhere, scraps of life littered the space. Rusted pots, a broken lantern, pages of paper curled with mildew. And in the far corner, tucked under a collapsed cot, lay a water-damaged notebook. Its cover, warped, carried the faint imprint of letters. H. Reynolds. The boys didn't linger. Panic clawed at them, driving them out into the storm. They ran, rain pelting, branches tearing at their arms, until they reached a signal and a ranger post. By dawn, investigators arrived, the cabin sealed with tape and floodlights. Professionals in gloves and masks stepped inside, boots squelching over maggots. Cameras flashed, clicking against silence. The remains were gathered carefully, bone by bone, into black bags zipped tight. 4 sets, each tagged, each name whispered in grim confirmation. David, Hannah, Emily, Joshua. The discovery sent a tremor through Montana. Newspapers screamed headlines again, but this time not with hope, only horror. At the diner, voices dropped low, spoons stirring coffee no one drank. 10 years, someone whispered. All that time, they were right there. Another voice cracked back. Hidden in plain sight. Forests don't give back easy. And in that cabin, beneath rot and silence, the truth had waited. Not whole, not gentle, but crawling, putrid, impossible to look away from. The Reynolds family had been found. But the why, the how they ended there, still twisted like a knife waiting to turn. Investigators worked slow, careful, because every scrap inside that cabin was fragile as ash. The notebook, water-stained and warped, was lifted into evidence with tweezers, its pages still clinging together. Under harsh light, letters bled but legible. The first entries were calm, almost hopeful. David's ankle swollen, keeping weight off. Found this cabin, shelter from the storm, kids holding up. But as days stretched, the handwriting grew jagged. Supplies dwindled. Hannah wrote of boiling creek water until it tasted of metal, of rationing crackers into crumbs, of Emily's cough echoing through the nights. One entry read simply, "Please, let tomorrow bring someone." Forensics painted the rest. David's leg had fractured, untreated, infection setting deep. He couldn't walk. The family had chosen to stay in that cabin, waiting for rescue that never came. Their food disappeared by the second week. Rain warped their firewood. The cold set in. By the third week, Hannah's notes trembled with desperation. One entry clawed across the page. I hear them cry in their sleep. God help me, what do I do? Then the writing stopped. The final pages were scattered notes, half sentences, words slanting off the edge. Investigators matched them against the remains. Forensic markings confirmed what no one wanted to read out loud. At least one of the bodies bore cut marks, signs of survival cannibalism. The conclusion was devastatingly clear. Trapped, starving, and abandoned by luck, the Reynolds family had turned on themselves in a final, unspeakable attempt to endure. When officials released the findings, the community recoiled. At the diner, no one laughed. Coffee cups sat cooling untouched. A man whispered, 10 years, right under our noses, and that's how it ended? Another muttered, almost in anger. Forrest, don't care. Chews you up, spits you out, if it spits you out at all. Hannah's sister received the journal. She didn't open it, not at first. She pressed it against her chest, eyes closed, whispering their names like a prayer. The Reynolds case was officially closed. But closure didn't feel like relief. It felt like standing in a cabin door, staring at maggots writhing over the truth, knowing the forest had held it back until it rotted. For a decade, the Reynolds family's absence haunted Montana. When the truth surfaced, it wasn't rescue, or peace, or even an answer anyone could accept. It was horror, raw, slow, and buried in the dark. The forest had kept it secret, and when it finally gave it back, it was nothing but bones, silence, and the kind of truth that stains. The forest kept the Reynolds family hidden for 10 long years, and when it finally gave them back, the truth was worse than the mystery. If stories like this grip you the way they did me, make sure to hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next case might be even darker.